Well, it is that time again. A new raid is out, the Sunwell, the final raid of the expansion, and all that loot in there is a really big step up from anything else available for players, and many are looking to fill out their BIS list to get one last blast out of TBC. And whilst many of us are still progressing in there, a few have been able to clear it even as a GDKP run. So I feel like I have to clarify so I'm not assuming everybody knows World of Warcraft jargon here. GDKP means gold dragon kill points, which also doesn't really mean anything. You've probably heard of DKP raids, where players are given points for things such as being on time for raid, having consumables, enchanting. It can be points for whatever you want, basically. Raiders can then use these points to bid on items, and that is how loot is distributed. GDKP replaces that point earning system with throwing your wallet. Throwing World of Warcraft gold at something. After each boss is defeated, the loot gets live sold real life auction house style. The only factor to you getting loot is how much gold can you throw at this one particular item. At the end of the raid, the pot, or total amount of gold collected through bids, is tallied up, then traded out among all raid members, depending on what kind of split was agreed in advance. For example, the organizer will take a large cut, the top DPS might get extra, a utility spec like an elemental shaman might get extra, and so on and so forth. This style of doing loot has become more and more popular amongst the classic player base, to the point where many people have their main character, which raids with your guild, and then you also have an alt for GDKPs, which for all intents and purposes is your gold farming character, but the gold you're farming isn't from any mobs or mining or herbing, it's from other players. Some gold bid runs only see trash loot that nobody wants and you leave with barely 100 gold, whilst others see BIS after BIS item drop and you can get in excess of 10k for a few hours work. No normal farming can compete with this at all, because the value in items for GDKPs is entirely on how much people have to spend, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, often brings into question, I wonder how these people can afford such huge quantities of gold. Flashback for a moment here, back to week 1 of Nax Ramus in Classic WoW. Very similar situation, week 1 GDKP clearing hard raid content and a BIS item drops, Gressel, Dawn of Ruin, the best one-handed sword in the game, and during that raid it went for a staggering 198,000 gold, and at the time this was completely unbelievable that any singular player had that sort of gold to throw at items, and by today's standards, well, let's just say it looks pretty cheap. Explanations out of the way, let's talk about the fact that this week a GDKP run managed to clear the Sunwell over 2 separate raid days and many hours invested, and came out the other side with a total pot of 1 million gold. That's 1 million classic gold. We'll talk about how much that really is in a moment. They saw many BIS items drop that went for over 100k each, but the biggest ticket item possible dropped for them, the legendary bow from Kil'jaeden himself, Thori'dal, the Star's Fury. An amazing weapon that any hunter would dream of having this early on into the phase so that they get to fully enjoy using it throughout the final tier of TBC, is what I would have said if the bow went to a hunter, because it didn't. Remember, the only merit you bring in a GDKP when receiving loot is how big your wallet is. Oh, and do you know that meme from back in the day, every weapon is a hunter weapon? Yeah, in Classic, that's every weapon, piece of armor, trinket, and just everything in general now belongs to a warrior, because Thori'dal went to a warrior. This item also wasn't bidded on, it was pre-sold, which makes this situation even better. So pre-selling is agreeing a price in advance if a certain item drops so that you know you're getting it for a fixed price. GDKPs do this because some items, despite being super sought after, aren't needed by all that many classes. It's the same story with glaives, only 2 classes can even use them, and with potentially as few as 2 people bidding, you probably won't see the actual perceived value of that item realized. In fact, sometimes people bid others up just because they think an item is going for too cheap and they would rather throw away their gold than see that happen. It's almost like the time invested in farming the gold has no meaning to them. Strange that. Anyways, it's guessing time. This is probably the first Thori'dal a GDKP has seen. It's pre-bought, as in they had already agreed to pay this much, and yes, it is BIS technically for warriors above other ranged weapons. It's already a lot more than the 198k that Gressel went for. In fact, it's more than gold cap, which is 214k, a lot more than gold cap, because if you guess that a warrior spent 350,000 gold on a stat stick, you would be right. And this was just over 1/3 of the pot total, to give you an idea of how much was spent. In terms of DPS gains over the next item for warriors, I've seen people comment it's about 20 or so more, so we're looking about 17.5k classic gold per DPS gained, which seems kind of pricey, I'd say. At the end of the raid, the average person who took part walked away with about 35,000 gold or so. Is that more than anyone else here has had throughout the whole duration of Classic as part of a 25-man split? Okay, yep, good, not just me then. So how much is 1 million gold actually then? Well, you can, if you want to, go out and trust people to trade gold from retail to classic or vice versa. It's not seen as selling or buying gold, as it's just a trade between one game and the other. Though if the trades are too big, I'd expect you to trigger some kind of auto-ban response. It's at your own risk kind of thing. And I went and had a look on a few swapping discords, and it appears as though many people start offers at about 1 classic gold for 250 retail. So that's some pretty simple maths there. If the earnings from this GDKP were traded on this basis, you're looking at 250 million retail gold potentially. Not bad that. To put it in perspective though, the sepulchre of the first ones, Race to World First, has been by far the most gold intensive raid ever by a very long margin, with many guilds spending over 500 mil retail gold to try and secure first place. Limit, for example, had a budget of 723 million gold going out, which at the time in WoW tokens equates out to somewhere in the region of $93,000 according to their own calculations. So this was the amount spent on a Race to World First, loads of sponsors, thousands of people watching, huge guild, massive social media presence, every possible advantage they could obtain to win, and they spend 723 million. TBC Classic GDKP clearing for some golden loot, no big event, no sponsors, no announcements, just a run to see if they can do it, 250 million gold. That's 1/3 of the amount for a guild who was contending for the world first clear of the new retail raid. And if Limit says that's about $93,000 and the gold was traded at a 1 to 250 rate, this GDKP run was worth about $31,000. However, those are the rates through gold trading, and the rates aren't as good doing this because, well, it's legit. Let's say, for example, then I knew the actual value of gold between each game is closer to 1 to 100. Oh, and by the way guys, don't buy gold, you'll totally get banned. In which case, it's still minimum 100 million gold in retail value, or through non-legitimate methods of obtaining gold, about $9,000. By the way, you replace all your TBC gear really fast in Wrath of the Lich King. Like, all of this stuff will get replaced, if not in heroic dungeons, which are very easy, then certainly by the time that you're doing the tier 7 raid content, which also, wouldn't you know it, is very easy. It's a lot of gold. Then again, you can't ignore that these world first guilds in retail are selling runs shortly after the race for 1 mil a pop, no problem. GDKPs exist because master loot is a thing. Taking it away would instantly break these kind of runs, only for them to shortly be replaced with boost runs, which now we have Wrath of the Lich King coming up, they have real value thanks to achievements, titles, mounts, and so on. It's all pretty interesting numbers, and that's why I've decided to do this as a video, but I've never really liked GDKPs and what they mean for the game, but a lot of people do. After all, if you don't see any items you want to drop, you still get gold at the end of the run. You're happy to see anybody get a Abyss item because that means dollar signs, and people won't leave after that item doesn't drop or suddenly have to go. The pot at the end keeps people going until it's done. But sometimes it feels as though the end doesn't justify the means. Even in TBC Classic right now, getting 1k gold per hour farming is extremely good, and I borderline want to say you can only really hit that amount consistently by doing mage boosting, which is again farming gold off of other players, not from the ways the game has created to do it. And people will always come back and say, but interacting with the auction house is also interacting with gold buying and selling. I mean, I can't remember the last time I've gone to the auction house to get some haste pots, which are now like 11g each by the way, and then somebody decides to bid me up to 100g per pot, because it can't happen. The auction house prices are decided by the server as a whole, not by the people in that one specific raid. If something's too much, people don't buy it. If it's too little, they get bought immediately. The problem is when you have people getting over 10k for running a standard raid, and then being able to pay literally whatever prices people post things for, because the value of gold has stopped having any meaning for them, which only ever means that prices keep going up and up. All in all though, 1 million spent in a GDKP run on European realms is an unreal amount. I bet China has already hit those kind of numbers, but then again, they have the WoW token. Europe does not. You just have to go out and quote unquote farm your gold. In original World of Warcraft, GDKPs were a thing as well, though they didn't start to get properly popular until mid to late Wrath of the Lich King, because you can bet nobody was able to complete gold bid runs of Sunwell back in 2008. In Classic, however, they've been adapted much earlier and to much greater effect. And with Wrath of the Lich King on the horizon, with its multiple difficulties, achievements, and mounts, you can bet that GDKPs are here to stay. And with how much gold is being pumped into them, things will only ever get more excessive. Maybe we'll even see a singular item go for 1 million gold by late game Wrath. I wouldn't even put it past it now. Imagine Heroic Deathbringer's Will, week 1. I bet that'll be the most expensive item we will see by far. Anyways, that is all for today. Another dose of GDKP drama. Let me know your thoughts. I imagine the comments will be a good one on this. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. And I shall see you all on the next one very soon.